everybody, and welcome back to Season 2 of Kash's Corner.
So, Kash, we're going to have to talk about Afghanistan. This is, frankly, I think every media in the world right now is talking about Afghanistan. You actually played a pretty important, really important role in the original withdrawal plan under the Trump administration. You were actually tasked with implementing it, among other things. Before we go there, this wasn't your kind of, first rodeo in dealing with Afghanistan, actually. You did quite a bit of work with respect to Afghanistan previously under the Obama administration.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are here talking about Afghanistan because it's not going well, but is my time at the Department of Justice. I was a terrorism prosecutor working a lot of prosecutions both in Afghanistan, related to Afghanistan, al-Qaeda, the Taliban, the Haqqani network. And then during the Obama administration, as a career official, I went to the military to a place called Joint Special Operations Command, where we worked with our special forces elements heavily in Afghanistan to find targets, or what we would call high value targets, HVTs. And they would need to meet a certain legal threshold based on intelligence before we could make a decision as to their what we called end state. End state being a kinetic strike via drone, a capture operation by our partner forces or our special forces, and or prosecution in America or abroad in some other country where we knew they would sufficiently face justice. So we did a lot of work in what we call the general targeting space, and to find an end state that we did. And we spent a lot of time with a lot of Army Special Forces, Navy Special Forces, and a number of other folks who assisted in that mission.
So, and there's at least one of these high-value targets, as you're describing, that was actually released. There were 5 of them that were released, I think, in 2014 as part of this hostage swap.
If you recall, Bo Bergdahl, a former Army soldier serving in Afghanistan, deserted his platoon, and after desertion was captured by the enemy, the Taliban and others. And he was in custody for some time, and I was still at DOJ. In the National Security Division when that case came up, and any hostage situation of an American automatically goes to the military and the Department of Justice if there's an available prosecution. And during the Obama administration, the president then made the determination to release 5 terrorists from Guantanamo Bay in return or exchange for Bo Bergdahl, the U.S. Army soldier who had deserted. And a lot of us back then didn't agree with that because that was essentially negotiating with Taliban and probably al-Qaeda at that point, but mostly because we were letting 5 known terrorists who were sitting in Guantanamo Bay back out. And even though there were assurances that they would never fight again, fast forward and now you have one of those individuals who is leading the Taliban effort against American interests today.
Okay, that's interesting. You're talking about taking issue with negotiating with terrorists, negotiating with Taliban. The Trump administration has been getting a bit of flack for actually doing that as, I guess, part of this withdrawal plan that you played a role in crafting.
No, and I think it's a good distinction to play. Look, Afghanistan and the Taliban are not mutually exclusive. The Taliban has been in Afghanistan for decades. They're not going anywhere. So when I say we should not negotiate with the Taliban, I don't mean writ large. I mean certain elements of the Taliban cannot be negotiated with, and certain exchanges cannot occur, like 5 terrorists from Guantanamo Bay. But in reality, a president has to deal with and negotiate with certain elements of the Taliban if you want to negotiate a peace in Afghanistan that doesn't involve a permanent U.S. troop presence. And President Trump and President Obama took different approaches on how to do that, and I think that's what you're getting at.
Well, sure. Okay, so you played a pretty central role in crafting the Trump administration plan. You were actually tasked with implementing it when you were part of in DOD.
Yeah.
So, and there's been, I guess, a lot of information or varied information and messaging around what that was, whether it was a problem, but why don't we actually get it from the horse's mouth? What is it that you created? When did it start? And was any of it implemented before January 20th? Give us
great
the scoop
question.
here.
So as the Chief of Staff for the Department of Defense, I report directly to the Secretary of Defense and the President of the United States. And our main mission for the president at that time, and it's no surprise to anybody, he campaigned upon it 5-6 years ago, was to end the forever wars. And one of those wars was Afghanistan. So we were charged with the task of withdrawing from Afghanistan safely and securely. And that became known as a conditions-based withdrawal. So we had to implement a plan where the Taliban and the Afghan government met conditions along the way to receive benefits from America and secure the peaceful withdrawal of our forces from Afghanistan. So first and foremost, if you're in Afghanistan, the thing you have to do right off the bat is reject al-Qaeda. Full stop. President Trump minced no words when he said there has to be a full and complete repudiation of al-Qaeda by the Taliban. They can't affiliate with them. That was a big condition of our plan. Another big condition of our plan was, in order to have peace in Afghanistan, you have to have the Afghan government and the Taliban come together, because those two parties have been in control of Afghanistan for the last 3 decades. So we wanted to negotiate a peaceful interim government with both those parties sitting at the table. And President Trump had that occurring with the Taliban and the Afghans meeting in places like Doha repeatedly to work towards a negotiated peace settlement. 3, we told them we would assist with terrorism operations, counterterrorism operations in country, with our special forces operators to combat terrorist threats that we knew would arise during this process, because it wasn't going to go from 0 to 100 overnight. We had to leave a special mission force in country to take care of that problem set. And 4, I think one of the biggest conditions or security threats that we had to instill in the Afghan and Taliban was that if an American interest was harmed or an American person was killed, President Trump himself told the leader of the Taliban that he would unleash the full fury of the Department of Defense in Afghanistan. And when he said that, they knew it had meaning. They knew he couldn't be crossed on that one specific condition, because then everything else would go by the wayside. So that was the basic structure of the plan. And then, of course, we have nodes in places like Bagram Airfield and things like that that were critical to executing that plan. And we did, as you mentioned, we actually implemented that plan. Come January 20th, we had successfully drawn down to 2,500 troops in country. And under that plan, not one American casualty occurred during that time period. So we were securely and safely withdrawing from Afghanistan. And I would highlight for our viewers, 2,500 troops in country in Afghanistan is the lowest since the war on terror began.
Okay, so, well, and then what happened? So there was, you were also a big part heading up the transition, right?
Yeah.
With the DoD especially. So, presumably you are sharing all this information. I think you've been on other shows. You've talked a little bit about the fact that you were doing this. You were at least attempting to share this information and the details of what your plan was.
Sure. So thanks. I appreciate you bringing that up, because transition is a huge part of this. The election had occurred and President Biden had won. So a transition of power was what we were instructed to do by the White House. Full stop. Not partial, a total and complete transition of power, because we are talking about transitioning the Department of Defense. Our head of national security apparatus must seamlessly transition from one administration to the next. It can't be political. So the regulations at DoD place the chief of staff in charge of that. But who actually runs it day to day is entire career officers, about 50 of them that work for me, ran the day-to-day operations to successfully transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration. And if I could break it down for you. So what does that entail? How do you get the incoming administration ready to continue some important mission like Afghanistan's withdrawal? You have to provide them with documentation. And not just any documentation, very classified elements and materials, our planning, our strategy, what we were doing day in and day out to successfully and conditionally withdraw from Afghanistan. So how do you do that? You collect all the materials from the Department of Defense. And let me just remind our viewers, you're talking about 3-some million people here who were one way or another could have touched Afghanistan writ large. And you document it, you take all the materials, all the writings, all the memos, all the recommendations, and all the intelligence, and you make it available to them. And we prided ourselves in the transition And if you look at it, and I wrote an op-ed on this some time ago, we provided the Biden transition team with the largest quantitative transition in U.S. presidential history. That is, we gave them more documents from the Department of Defense than had ever been turned over in the history of the U.S. presidential transition. Another key component to transitioning is not just documentation, but people and personnel. So the Department of Defense, as you know, is almost entirely career professionals, as it should be, civilian and military. We gave access to Biden's incoming national security team from the Department of Defense and the White House to myself, to the Secretary of Defense, to all of our undersecretaries. We didn't preclude them from having access to anyone because there are so many moving pieces to a conditions-based withdrawal in Afghanistan. We're just using this one example. We could flip to anything else and it's the same. But in order to successfully execute that plan, you have to give them, the incoming administration, access to the careers and the political officers in that administration. And we did that more so than any other time in presidential history transition. So we did the documentation and we did the personnel.